Agentic AI is going to solve your problem without any human intervention.
A 96% reduction in their mean time to resolve problems.
We live in a world where there's driverless cars. Why isn't there driverless IT?
If the system can detect a bad experience, it can automatically trigger the steps that a human being would do.
Make sure they can show you what that looks like in operation.
No one had designed a system that was capable of getting telemetry from the endpoint itself.
Wow, that's incredible.
We also agree there's one way, one process. It's the client's process. Business changes way too frequently now.
It would be like having an IT team following users around.
I have a cyber team, I have a LAN team, I have a WAN team, I have a desktop team, I have an application team, I have a...
Wake up!
What is one advice or a suggestion that you would give to the IT leaders?
It's a mindset change first. You have to know that that's possible and have to go after it.
Those metrics are something unheard of. Deploying thousands of APIs over a weekend.
A lot of competition focused on technology transformation. What you really need, if you're going to get business performance, is operations transformation.
It's no longer good enough to measure network uptime.
And how is it fundamentally different from traditional networking model?
It's a layer 8 problem. Humans have to understand that we are at this inflection point.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this special episode. Today, we are exploring a powerful shift in how enterprise networks are built and operated, AI native networking, and how two industry leaders, Juniper Networks and Microland, are teaming up to deliver what many could now call it as self-driving networks. In this episode, we will take a deep dive into Juniper and Microland AI advantage and explore how AI-powered network infrastructure and operations are transforming enterprise IT, from complexity and firefighting to intelligence, automation, and experience-first outcomes. Now, let's meet our two incredible guests who are right at the heart of this transformation. Our first guest has spent over 3 decades of shaping the enterprise networking landscape. He has been at the forefront of evangelizing AI networking and played a pivotal role in the success of one of the industry's most transforming platforms, Mist AI. His leadership has been instrumental in Juniper recognizing as a leader in Gartner Magic Quadrant for wired and wireless LAN infrastructure. 4 years in a row, he joined Juniper through the acquisition of Mist Systems. And since then, he has been leading the change to make experience-first networking a reality for enterprises around the world. I'm not sure if he remembers this, but I first connected with him back in 2017 when Microland signed a global MSA with Mist. I'm thrilled to welcome Tom Wilburn, Global Vice President of Campus and Branch Networking at Juniper Networks. Tom, it's a pleasure to have you on this show.
Thank you, KK, and I do remember.
Excellent. Fantastic. And our next guest is not just an industry leader, but also a dear colleague and someone I have had the privilege of collaborating with for over 7 years. He has dedicated a major portion of his 3-decade-long career to leading network transformation initiatives across the globe, from heading critical technology programs at Fortune 50 companies to championing the adoption of emerging technologies in managed services. At Microland, he has been instrumental in shaping the company's AI-powered Intelligini NetOps platform, delivering smarter, faster, and more predictive network operations for global enterprises. Under his leadership, Microland has been recognized as a leader in Gartner Magic Quadrant for managed network services for 5 consecutive years. I am absolutely delighted to welcome Bob Wysocki, Senior Vice President and Global Client Solutions Leader at Microland. Bob, it's great to have you on this show. Welcome.
Thanks, KK. And I think my first day in the office was also with you back in 2017.
Absolutely. And post that, we also went for a nice dinner at a pub.
Yep. Was it dinner, though?
It is dinner. It is dinner.
It was dinner.
It was dinner. Nice and newly opened, kind of a retro pub where we went. I still remember. I have the photos too. Excellent. So let's start with your lens, Bob. How does Microland define AI-powered network operations, and what does that look like in a day-to-day for enterprises?
Look, it's not the 1990s, it's not 2000s anymore. Networks is not about keeping lights on. Enterprises are becoming digital businesses, and that means that the network is no longer just this mechanism to have internal employees access applications, right, for their efficiency. With the digital business, networks are directly impacting customer experience, say in a retail environment, or driving business productivity if you're in some kind of factory environment. So for AI operations, I mean, let's keep it basic. There's three things that you need to do to manage a network. The first thing you need to do is observe it, then you need to understand it, and then you need to control it. By using AI, in terms of observability, it used to be, we'd have threshold monitoring, right? And you'd have, networks are very noisy things. You need to make sure that you have very robust telemetry. So it's no longer just about metrics. You want to bring in logs that are a rich source of information. You want to bring in configurations. You want to bring in usage patterns. And AI helps you basically understand all those things in terms of what's happening within the network. That's about observe. In terms of understanding, what you need to do is you need to understand what is the health of the network as it relates to a particular application. For that, you need to understand context. You need to understand the semantic relationships. It's not just this switch is connected to this router is connected to this circuit. Yes, that's connectivity. You need to understand what's production, what's supporting a business application, what resources are consumed by, right? So if CPU utilization goes to 80%, that could be so what? Who cares? Or that could be, devastating. So to understand your network, you need to understand context. And then finally, in order to control, we come from a world where we basically were human first and then sometimes assisted by technology. With AI, we get to turn that around. Anything that happens in the network now, first thing goes to an agentic AI bot to understand what's going on. Can I run some diagnostic commands? Do I know how to fix this myself? The vision should be about 70% of the time that agentic AI is going to solve your problem without any human intervention. And then ultimately, if you can't, then 30% of the time through a chat ops interface, basically bring in your engineers so they can collaborate. They can understand, what happened the last 3 times this happened. AI can recommend, how to solve that problem for you. That's the world that we're living in. That's what day-to-day operations looks like.
That's fantastic. And a good segue on that. You talked about agentic AI and AI ops, and I know very well that you have been very instrumental in shaping the intelligent unit ops. Can you give us some example in terms of how practically it has solved some of the enterprise problems and some practical use cases that you could share?
Yeah, sure. So you'll hear us from a marketing tagline perspective say, we drive 10x efficiency in operations.
Yeah, absolutely,
and
indeed.
While I refer to that as marketing, actually that is real. Right? So let's talk about incidents. Let's talk about changes. Let's talk about service requests. In terms of incidents, in a recent example with a client that I'm aware of, they had a factory down for 5 hours on a Sunday, right? And we're talking about, millions of dollars of lost productivity. There were 60 people that came to the bridge because they had no idea why the factory was down, right? So on a Sunday, they could have been watching the Patriots or something like that instead, right? So if you're instead using Microland's IntelliGenie platform, it would have taken less than 5 minutes to understand, from the vast array of, is it an application problem, is it a VM storage problem, is it a WAN problem, is it an internet problem, is it a desktop bug problem? When you use Microland's IntelliGenie observability platform, you'll know within less than 5 minutes where exactly that outage is. One person could have stayed on the bridge. The other 59 could have gone off and enjoyed their day, right? So 10x type of improvement. That's an example where, the outage maybe still went on for 5 hours because it was a third-party service. In other examples, you can take TTR down from, 2 hours to 5 or 10 minutes when you're using agentic AI and it's basically solving a problem, right? Take an example of, let's say, a core switch is not hard down, but it's degrading, right? And so that's impacting some kind of business application performance. The agentic AI can sense that there's a problem, can understand that, it's not, it is actually impacting something of value. So let me turn that into an incident. I can run some diagnostic commands to understand that the core switch is having a problem. I can then institute a bot to make force a failover to the secondary, and then I can send a ticket to an engineer to basically make sure that nobody forgets about bringing the core switch back up as the primary. So again, that all happens in minutes, right? As opposed to somebody trying to figure out where that problem was, and that might take, an hour or 2 hours. So that's in the incident realm. Changes in service requests. Typically these days for most clients, if they're doing a firewall change, if they're doing a DDI request, you're talking 3, 4, or 5 days is what is typical. By bringing in self-service portals where people just have to say, I want this done, speaking natural language or typing that into a chatbot and using Agentic AI, those things can get done in minutes or hours as opposed to 3 to 5 days. I recently had a conversation with a CTO of one of our clients. He said it took him 9 months to implement 3 new OT sensors into his factory. And I looked at him and said, welcome to your new world. We'll do that for you in about a week. So a lot of business productivity there.
Fantastic. My follow-up question was about what are the matrices that you follow on measuring the 10x productivity?
More importantly than that, KK, is, we've lived in a world where there's IT SLAs, and everybody likes to talk about what is this thing called SLO, right? The value chain that somebody should be expecting from their provider is to go from basic availability to agility to performance to flawless performance. And when you're able to elevate by using some automation, using digitization of transformation, bringing in agentic AI cases, bringing in observability, the business starts to notice, right? It's no longer about this IT SLA. One of our clients is able to translate, it's a healthcare client, global healthcare client. They know exactly that, minutes of further uptime in their network, what that means in terms of dollars produced for their CT scanners and MRIs going out the door. They're able to make that correlation into a business metric of lost productivity. That's very powerful. That's not something that normally has been done in the past 20 years.
Incredible. But if the time to resolve the ticket, time to deploy becomes 10x faster, how is this changing the way how engineers are doing their day-to-day activities?
Sure.
Right?
Well, KK, I love analogies, right? So the first thing I want to say about that is, let's say I want to lose 20 pounds, right? I could go research on the internet, what's the best diet plan, all nutrition, and which, diet should I follow? I could go research all these different exercise mechanisms, and then I'll, put together a plan for myself to do that. That might take me literally, 10, 15, 20 hours, depending on how much research I want to do over a couple weeks. Or, I can take the data coming out of my Aura Ring, port it into ChatGPT, and have that plan, designed for me in 30 seconds, right? So AI does not make me dumber as a person. It makes me more efficient. So now translate that into the world of, AI and networking. In the past, we've relied on, triple CCIE guys that know where all the skeletons are buried because they've been managing this network for 10 years. And even them, with all that knowledge, but that knowledge is in their head, might still, because they're sequentially going through trying to find, where the problem is, even with that much talent, it might take, an hour. When you have AI basically telling you type what has changed, and the system tells you, oh, you had a configuration, failover. Oh, you had a change in traffic flow. Oh, you had a change in health state. And by the way, the last 3 times this happened, here's the recommendation of what you should do. Now that engineer, can spend a couple minutes and then use his time to go off and, deploy some new innovation or embrace new technology that drives business productivity. So AI is helping our engineers, just be more effective and not have to do all this, grunt work that they've had to do for years and years and years.
I love that analogy you mentioned. It doesn't make you dumber, but make you more efficient.
Yes.
Excellent. And just pivoting from that little bit, specific to how Microland's approach is different from on managed services compared to the others. How do you describe that, Bob?
Yeah. I'm going to give you two answers. One's a behavioral business type of answer, and one's more of a technical answer. So our approach to behavior is, look, there's one way to manage a network. I think a lot of our larger competitors or telcos, it's their way of doing business, right? It's their process, it's their tools, it's their systems. As a client, because I was a client at GE, you would most feel that at 2 a.m. in the morning on a Tuesday when an outage has been going on for 6 hours and the next person from the provider shows up and says, what's going on here? Right? That is a provider process, right? Microland doesn't look at it that way. We also agree there's one way, one process. It's the client's process, not our process. Business changes way too frequently now, right? What a business wants of you in January may change by the time you get to May. The internal client IT team doesn't get to tell the business, no, we're not going to do that. They have to toe the line. Why should we as a provider get to say no to our client? Oh, that's not in the statement of work. I'll have to issue a change control. The world does not work that way anymore. So we basically try to look at our clients and say, whatever you need to be successful, that's what we're going to do. And so it's very much, what does the client need? So I think that's a very big behavioral difference. From a technical perspective, I think, it's my opinion, maybe it's not right. A lot of competition focuses on technology transformation. Oh, let me get you the best technology. Let me deploy software-defined blah, blah, blah. Let me deploy SASE for you. Let me deploy private 5G. Going back to high school algebra, that's necessary, but not sufficient, right? What you really need if you're going to get business performance is operations transformation. So while Microland, yes, will help you accelerate your technology transformation, we are much more about operations transformation. How can we make you manage your network better? How can I leverage AI? How can I leverage analytics? How can I leverage AI to do some of the things that we've talked about? And I think that's a major difference, and our clients feel it.
Fantastic, Bob. I think very nicely put together. And I have a follow-up questions around that. I remember you wrote a nice article as well some time ago about the breakfast.
The pig and the bacon.
Exactly. One commits. I want to touch upon that particularly. How do you see that difference? Telcos trying to be in techco, and that's also there is a bit of customers' behavior also changing. They are now looking at underlay, overlay, and so on differently. How do you see that journey, and where do you see that differentiation coming very effectively?
Yeah, so before I was a technology guy, I was a sourcing guy, right? Mm-hmm. And so, I love my sourcing friends, but be careful, right? Because sourcing people, what do they like to do? They like to bundle things because I get more productivity, I get more sourcing productivity. The bigger, a $10 million deal, I can get so much sourcing productivity. If it's a $100 million deal, I can get so much more for you, right? So some clients look to bundle the transport with equipment, with services. And when you do that bundling, naturally you're going to turn to my telco friends of the world, to do that because they control the fiber, they control the spectrum. I would tell you that even if you get an extra 10% on a $100 million deal, you've saved $10 million of sourcing productivity. Now, telcos are great organizations. I respect them. They're very good at providing fiber. They're very good at providing spectrum. And they can be very good about fulfilling equipment. I can say from personal experience and from the hundreds of people that I've talked to, and I apologize to my telco friends, I'm not sure they're known for good service. So when you have the situation that I just talked about and a factory is down for 5 hours and you're not getting good service from your telco, guess how many millions of dollars you're losing? It's not the $10 million of sourcing productivity that you saved once for a 3-year term or a 5-year term. It's $10, $50, $100 million that you're saving every time your outage gets extended, right? So I think that's why, I would say, don't bundle, right? Because you're going to force the selection to somebody that's not known to provide good service. You need to focus on good service gives you good business productivity.
Totally agree with you because the core of what these companies deliver are completely different. Telcos focused heavily on the existing investment, underlay, and so on. And the additional services component is just an add-on to make sure that what they get. So you have been in this space for quite a long time. And
Quiet.
and you have seen the evolution, right, from traditional networks to getting bit modern technology, and now AI, and then agentic AI, and so on. What excites you that's happening currently with the agentic AI and moving forward? What does that keep you excited?
Yeah. So I guess for 33 of my 35 years in career, it was always about building a better mousetrap, right? ATM and frame relay went to MPLS. MPLS went to internet. Legacy technology, CLI based, went to software defined. Purpose-built infrastructure architecture went to cloud-based, stuff. I can remember, being at GE back in 2014, 15, saying, I'm so bored. There's just like nothing going on. And then you're looking at your peers in compute and application, and they've got DevOps, and they've got infrastructure as code, and they've got all this automation, and then you got cloud FinOps, right? And you're like, God, we're the redheaded stepchild of the IT family, right? Where there's nothing going on. So for 33 years, it was always about build a better mousetrap, which was technology transformation, technology transformation, technology transformation. Finally, we now have innovation in operations transformation and how you manage the network with AI. So it's absolutely an inflection point. Look, we live in a world where there's driverless cars, right? Why isn't there driverless IT? It's a mindset change first. You have to know that that's possible and have to go after it, right? So I like to say it's a layer 8 problem, right? Humans have to understand that we are at this inflection point, lean into it, go after it, and don't be satisfied with all this technology transformation stuff.
Your mousetrap, building a better mousetrap was a good one. And given you interact with IT leaders day in, day out across the globe in different industries and so on, what is one advice or a suggestion that you would give to the IT leaders who are currently considering a transformation of their network infrastructure from the traditional to a powered network infrastructure?
Yeah, like two things. I mean, the example has been staring us in the face for the last 10 years. If you look at Netflix, if you look at Google, if you looked at LinkedIn, what did they do? They treated their infrastructure like a fabric, and they collapsed all these technology towers down into an SRE type of based approach. And because of that, they have flawless performance, right? So, but if you look at the way, I'll say, I don't have data on this, but feel pretty confident, 95, 98% of enterprise IT organizations, how are they structured? In silos. I have a cyber team, I have a LAN team, I have a WAN team, I have a desktop team, I have an application team, I have a data center team, I have a cloud team. The first thing that, the first advice is, I'll say it kind of harshly, wake up. The very structure of your organization is a disabler towards achieving flawless performance. You need to emulate the same thing, right? You need to realize that there's a better way of doing business by having this observability platform that you can understand the health state, that you can use Agentic AI, right? So the first one is look around you and realize, there is a better way. Raise your expectations, right? And the second thing is, now that your expectations have raised, go look for a provider that can not just tell you, because unfortunately there's still a lot of architecture out there. I mean, AI is a huge buzzword, right? And people are slapping it on left and right. Make sure they can show you what that looks like in operation, and that how have they deployed it for other clients, and what are the business results that they've done. How are they using, how have they built a knowledge graph? How are they using observability? How are they using Agentic AI to drive the 10x operational improvements that I've talked about?
In fact, connects well to what Tom mentioned about Wi-Fi is not connected to the cloud, and now with the cloud controllers, it's amazing looking at what is currently available in the market and taking a fresh perspective on getting some modern infrastructure in place. And that also connects well with giving the experience first approach. It's not something behind the IT team somebody is working on. Very interestingly, one of the IT leader, head of data, I was having a conversation and said, who's your network provider? I really don't know. There's someone, So people don't care about it until, till the time something fails completely. And this is a time to transform and take it to them. I'm going to now direct a few questions which are to both of you. And we'll probably start with Tom, and then I'll come to you, Bob.
Sure.
Juniper and Microland are both recognized as Gartner Magic Quadrant leaders. From your perspective, what makes this partnership work so well, Tom?
Well, number one, Microland is a partner with global scale, so it suits our customer base very well. But more importantly, and Bob talked about this a moment ago, we have an incredible tool set to leverage with our AI-driven networking capabilities. But it's important that the network operator want to use that tool set. We've seen providers take this brand new tool set and want to operate it in 1980 mode, is what I call it, because those are the processes that they have built their services around. So what we see in Microland is an organization that is modern in its approach and can leverage the automation and the AI that we bring forward.
So as they say, it's not only that fancy or expensive or the horsepower under the bonnet, but it is also the driver in the seat. What do you say, Bob? How do you describe it?
Yeah, two things. And I'll kind of take your lead, right? So if you want anything done right, you need two things. You need a good set of tools, and you need a good operator, right? And because, again, I like analogies. If I took a doctor from the 1800s and gave him today's surgical tools, he wouldn't be able to operate because he doesn't know how to use them. If I took a doctor from today and gave him the surgical tools from the 1800s, he also wouldn't be able to operate, right? Mm-hmm. So you basically need, the best surgeon with the best surgical tools to have a successful operation. So with Juniper, you have the best surgical tools. I mean, the telemetry that they give is just second to none. The power of the AI-driven insights is second to none. The overall quality that they have is second to none. And with Microland, you have that surgical doctor that knows how to operate these tools, how to get the maximum value. And it's not because we're trying harder. It's because we've actually integrated our technology with their technology to be able to deliver some of these outcomes. So that's the one thing. And then throw on top of that, I guess, just the culture of the two organizations are incredibly similar. I think the drive for innovation, the drive for continuous service improvement, the drive to just do anything that it takes to make the client happy. Independently, we have that DNA, but together, I think it just makes for a very powerful combination.
How do you see the Mist AI and Intelligent InnoTops blending together?
Sure. So 3 important ways, right? We'll talk about during transformation, then we'll talk about incident resolution, and then we'll talk about maintaining the best experience, right? So for transformation, Mist has these incredible templates that help you digitize and get to zero-touch provisioning. Even that said, when it comes time to deploy, especially at scale, as an operator, there's a lot of things that you have to input, things like IP schemes, DHCP configurations, VLAN type of stuff, right? Now, the operator from the 1980s will put a human sit there and type all that stuff into the template, right? Humans don't do well with, typing, numerous octet numbers, right? So what Microland does is we consume those templates via API, but then we automate the insertion, not only just the insertion of all these variables, but then we'll run pre-validation checks, post-validation checks. Is what I deployed what I intended to deploy, right? So that helps the transformation go 30% faster. In terms of incident reduction, Mist comes out of the box. It can, detect a poor radio and correct it by itself. It can detect a bad cable and tell you that that's going on. So there's tremendous amount of value in terms of incident reduction and TTR. But then, there's a domain that Mist plays in. So Mist where we hand off to each other, Mist is going to automatically tell me, hey, Bob, there's a duplex mismatch. It by itself can't correct that, but it can detect it. Microland, with its bots, can say, okay, Mist, thank you for telling me that there's a duplex mismatch. I'm going to go run some diagnostic commands, and I'm going to issue some other commands to resolve that, either automatically, which is probably most of the time, or then at least get an engineer, right? So there's an integration there between the two systems that helps incident reduction. And then in terms of maintaining user experience, the best thing I love about Mist is these wonderful SLEs, right? That says, hey, you're having a bad roaming experience, or you're having trouble, connecting to your authentication, right? But again, if all that sits as in some GUI and nobody pays attention to it, then you're wasting all that value that Mist is telling you. So Microland doesn't believe in GUIs. Microland believes in APIs. So we'll take those Mist SLEs through APIs, and we'll create a service experience dashboard. Hey, Mr. Client, what's your top 6 mission-critical applications? I want to use these Mist SLEs to tell, by user, what is the experience that user is having for this mission-critical application on the network. And even if it's degraded, I'll be able to automatically detect that because we're trending it over time. And either remediate it immediately, or if it's something that's just kind of low boil in the background, we'll use that for proactive problem management. At the end of the day, what we offer as an outcome is an optimum user experience that we're proactively managing based on the Mist SLEs that we're being fed electronically.
Absolutely. I might switch the question next to Tom, particularly. What is the kind of joint success we have seen, joint success? Maybe you can share the name, or if it is, you can, without sharing the names, you could tell some of the success stories in this joint delivery to the customers, Tom.
Well, I think we've partnered with some of the largest retailers in the world. It's a vertical where Mist AI has done extremely well.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it really is about just optimizing the overall outcomes that the customer wants to get from the network. Mm-hmm. So it is about service delivery. It is about increasing reliability. Inherently, the Mist system is designed to reduce the number of trouble tickets that we get from the network dramatically. But when there is an issue, and there still are, how do we resolve the time to close those trouble tickets rapidly? And I think what we see with Microland is a combination of the systems that we bring with the processes that Microland builds, and then the combination of our 2 different AI approaches. That's really what optimizes that environment.
Fabulous. Any joint customer success stories?
Let me double click on that one, right, a little bit more, right? So it's a large retailer that's kind of a stone's throw from here. They have over 3,000 retail outlets, as well as about 60 different very large depots and fulfillment centers. And before the joint partnership, the client had made an investment in Juniper. But they had 3 problems. Number 1 was speed of transformation. When you've made such a large investment, you want to realize that investment as soon as you can, right? I mean, that's just time to business value. But unfortunately, because of what I said earlier, the lack of too much manual input and not doing things in a digitized, automated fashion, the client found themselves hundreds of stores behind, right? So with our joint partnership and with the integration of IntelliGenie and the Mist templates, we're able to accelerate that transformation 30% faster than they were doing. So their time to value is a lot better. The second thing is, speaking about value, and Tom said it earlier, all this wonderful, rich, information is sitting at their fingertips, and they're looking, it's on the screen, and they're not even looking at it, right? So if you're the client, why spend all this money on all this powerful technology and get absolutely no value from it?
Absolutely.
So kind of repeating what I said, by integrating IntelliGenie, NetOps with Mist, the client is now able to see, the time to resolution, the 40 to 90% of changes in service requests automated. And then the final thing is, some of these depots are like million square feet, right? And they have automated forklifts that kind of go, all up and down this thing, right?
Don't tell me they are relying on the Wi-Fi.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. They're relying on the
gosh.
Wi-Fi, but with 1 million square feet, this is not, an overnight switch from their past OEM to Juniper Mist, right? This is something that'll go on for days and probably multiple weekends. So in that period of time, these automated forklifts need to maintain connectivity from the old OEM technology to the Juniper as they're traveling, down the row. Now, this isn't rocket science, but it also isn't fall out of bed easy. So Juniper engineers, Microland engineers collaborated to make sure that was seamless, connectivity for these automated forklifts, because if they stop, it's back to millions of dollars, of operations loss, when you have an outage. So that's the value that we're providing jointly together to this retail client.
Excellent. We'll start with some basics. For those unfamiliar, what is Mist AI and how is it fundamentally different from traditional networking models?
So I think I'll take this back to the beginning. Mist was founded to automate day two operations of the network. In part, the team at Mist was inspired by the acquisition of Meraki that we did while we were at Cisco. The founders of Meraki did a wonderful job of simplifying network deployments. Even someone like myself can deploy a Meraki network. Where we wanted to pick up was where they left off, and that was to simplify day two operations of the network. And what it required us to do was to understand user experience in real time. We had to transform the workflow of dealing with an issue. If you think about the workflow in a traditional network, when there's a problem, it's fairly simple but very inefficient. A user experiences a problem. They may or may not report the problem to IT. If they do report the problem to IT, usually a technician has to replicate the problem, get it to happen again, then have the right equipment to figure out what caused it. What we wanted to do was to be able to literally monitor the experience of every user every minute. If there was a problem, see the problem happen, not rely on a user to have to report it to IT, and then automatically capture all of the crime scene footage, if you will, of the problem on the network, and if possible, diagnose it and fix it. And that's the journey that we've been on. So the fundamental starts with understanding user experience. It's no longer good enough to measure network uptime as a barometer of whether you have a good network.
I still remember, maybe I need to give this pointer, in one of our early conversations, the earlier pitch was you were mentioning the networks as a platform or an industry has not changed for 30 years.
It really hadn't. Networks, the way we designed them, network management was the correct term because we were managing network elements. No one had designed a system that was capable of getting telemetry from the endpoint itself. And that was the fundamental change with Mist.
So the follow-up question on that, you mentioned about transforming day two operations. Can you give some specific examples how this has transformed enterprise network?
First of all, it's not that we only worked on day two. That really did inspire a new architecture. But there was a lot of room for improvement on day one as well. So what we want AI and automation to help us with is to deploy faster at lower cost with fewer mistakes than any other approach in the market. So when I think about that, we've had the world's largest company deploy as many as 4,000 access points in a single evening. And this was a large-scale transformation.
Wow.
We had a university during the pandemic that deployed, with the help of students, over 2,000 APs in dorm rooms over a weekend. We had a university during the pandemic. We deployed 13,000 access points across a campus while students were there in 4 months. So it is possible to transform and move rapidly in both day zero and day one. Where we want to change day two operations and the outcomes that we're seeing is we've had customers, and I think the best example is ServiceNow has been fairly public. We've replaced the network at ServiceNow for wired, wireless, SD-WAN, and NAC. And their CIO challenged us to a race to zero. a network where there were 0 trouble tickets reported by users. That's a pretty bold challenge. And they've credited us with achieving more than a 90% reduction in trouble tickets. And this really is the ability of our AI to monitor user experience in real time.
Mm-hmm.
In some cases, self-drive. We can do things with radio resource management and other things to fix things automatically. But the definition that they applied was, it's not that there would never be an issue, 0 issues. It would be 0 issues reported by users. So it allowed time to say, if we could be proactive, identify an issue, then we just have to fix it before a user had time to open up a trouble ticket. And so that was remarkably successful. The other transformation that we've seen is one of the world's largest logistics companies measured a 96% reduction in their mean time to resolve problems. So from the time a trouble ticket was opened until it was closed by 96%. And that goes back to the workflow that I described. If the system can detect a bad experience, it can automatically trigger the steps that a human being would do. It would be like having an IT team following users around with a sniffer, ready to capture a problem if it happened, and do an automated root cause analysis. And it translated directly into a 96% reduction in MTTR. It's gotten to the point now where our general expectation is that we can reduce a customer's total number of tickets by 70 or 80% and reduce the time it takes to resolve the remaining tickets by more than 70 or 80%. We kind of expect that now from the network.
Fabulous. Those metrics are something unheard of. Deploying thousands of APs over a weekend is incredible.
It does sound a little unbelievable, but your point is correct. It's actually the leaders in every vertical, the largest financial services institutions, the largest retailers, the largest logistics companies, right down to largest healthcare providers have all made the move because these outcomes are real and they have to be compelling for organizations of this scale to want to make a change.
Fabulous. You spoke about day 1, day 2, and the speed at which it can be deployed, the ease that it can be managed. But from a user perspective, experience first networking, right? What does that mean? How do you measure it?
When the company was founded, our head of product, Sudhir Mata, was tasked with asking customers, what are your top 10 problems you want to solve? And a person answered in a very creative way. He said, we don't have 10 problems. We only have 2. Users can't connect and the Wi-Fi sucks. And this person really summarized, if you're managing a help desk, what do people say when they have a problem? I can't connect or the Wi-Fi sucks. So it forced us to think about, well, how would you measure and metric those things? And we developed what we call service level expectations around 7 parameters. 2 that were designed to evaluate pre-connection, how rapidly we connect, how many connects fail, and 5 that were there for post-connection status. Things like throughput, capacity, roaming, all of the characteristics that would define a Wi-Fi experience that sucks. So we now measure and metric every user, every minute, around these 7 service level expectations. And those, from an AI perspective, are considered AI primitives. This is the basic building blocks to understand the experience of every user every minute. And it really was from that standpoint of, how do I tell if the Wi-Fi sucks?
So I know SLA and XLA, experience level agreements, but now I have a XLE, which is experience level expectations from the customers. So much of telemetry is being pulled up, right? This is some of the core of our foundation that is required to deliver what Mist is delivering to its customers. Have you seen any very interesting insights from those telemetries that you receive across the globe?
So routinely, we go into networks and we see things that sometimes IT was not aware of.
Okay.
We have the ability, and it sounds simple, but it's actually an advanced neural networking technique to tell us without false positives whether we have a bad cable. I know that sounds simple, but it's actually hard to find. And routinely, when we'll do a proof of concept with a customer, we'll say, yeah, you actually have a bad cable. There was degraded experience, low data rates, things like that, or simply something wasn't working. We find missing VLANs where the switch is up and running and has a green light. The access point is up and running and has a green light. But the users that connect to that access point end up going nowhere. Sometimes it shows up as a roaming failure. This has happened recently. We see a lot of DHCP issues that people don't understand are actually happening in the network and causing bad experiences. And it's the ability to measure in real time and then understand what's happening that allows us to get to that. But the level of insight that we're seeing more and more now is almost at a business level. Post-pandemic, most organizations, most large enterprises have a real estate team that's charged with optimizing the use of the company's real estate. And most CFOs want to know, are my spaces being utilized? So we build location services into our wireless network that would tell me how many people are in a conference room for how long, or whether we've optimized the use of the overall office space. That's an insight that the business wants that the network can
Fabulous.
provide.
Fabulous.
We had a banking customer that was had selected Mist as the wireless standard going forward. And in parallel, there was a real estate team that was about to spend $4 million to put sensors in all the offices to understand how it was being used. And it was coincidental that they were looking at a Gartner Magic Quadrant for indoor location services. They saw Juniper as a leader in that quadrant, and they had just heard that Juniper was being selected as Wi-Fi, and we've been the leader of leaders in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for wired and wireless. And the facilities team didn't really want to spend $4 million, and more importantly, didn't want to manage this sensor network. So they connected the dots, reached out to IT and said, can you do this? And sure enough, yeah, that one platform does both.
So it is also being used by the facility management system or the building's facility management system.
Absolutely, positively. And now we're seeing our university customers go a step further, not only for facilities management, but they're wondering if the network has insights about whether a student is engaged in campus life. One of the world's most prestigious universities, their concern is simply graduation rate. They have some of the finest students in the world coming in, but not everyone graduates. And that's a concern. They want to reduce, if you will, the dropout rate. So they're wondering, are there insights from the network that would say, maybe the student isn't showing up in the classroom on a regular basis. Maybe they don't go to the library. Maybe they're not participating in campus life. And are there insights that we could get from the network that would tell us that?
Wow. Wow. That's incredible. Deploying and keeping the users happy in a university campus is not easy. For them, it's air, water, and Wi-Fi.
It absolutely is.
Yeah. Love the insights on how do you track the behavioral pattern or engagement of the students in the university is an incredible example. AI is a buzzword everywhere it is. So how does Juniper Mist or Juniper wired and wireless networks differentiate itself compared to others when everyone today claims they have some form of an AI?
So we started more than a decade ago on this journey to solve these problems, and AI was a tool that we used. But you're right, now AI is a buzzword, and every networking vendor has labeled their equipment as capable of AI. So the number one thing we do to differentiate is we simply ask customers to test our equipment in a production environment. If you bring our equipment into a lab, it's helpful, but candidly, anybody's Wi-Fi, anybody's switch is going to work in a lab. To experience the difference that our AI makes, it has to be in the wild, if you will. It has to be on a production network where problems happen. And then the visibility that we provide is literally eye-opening to the customers. The other thing about AI is our founder will say it's like, making great wine. To make great wine, you have to have great grapes. To deliver great experiences with AI, you have to have great data. We've been working now for more than a decade with an organization that is unique. We combined our customer support and our engineering teams together, literally sitting side by side years ago, so that we took every single trouble ticket that we got from a customer and we passed it through our teams asking the question, did our AI recognize the problem? Did it diagnose it correctly? And if it didn't, we went through an iterative process to develop it. So there's 10 years of work that we've been doing to get to this point, and it shows up in networks. We've seen claims from other vendors to be able to, recognize issues, and they're generating so many false positives that the customers start ignoring them. When we tell you there is a problem, when we tell you there is a bad cable, there is a bad cable with no false positives. DNS can be fairly noisy on a network. When we tell you there's a DNS issue, there is a DNS issue. So it's the efficacy of the AI and the data that really matters to make it usable. And that's why we ask our customers, ideally, to try it in a production network. And then now, as importantly, talk to someone else that has. Most of our customers have run another vendor's equipment. We've replaced something, and they've evaluated the latest from that vendor, and then they've deployed our equipment. And anyone that has hands-on experience with both, you can see the difference.
So you talked about customers evaluating various products. When you get through that phase, like doing a proof of concept or a pilot, what kind of the success rate do you see?
It's typically in the 90 to 95% range.
Wow.
So if a customer takes the time to actually hands-on evaluate our equipment, I can think of very few that have not moved forward with a purchase. And the ones that are in that 5% range, sometimes it's a loss of funding, something came up that they kept them from moving forward, but it's very, very high.
So that means people, once they get to see it in action, they absolutely love it.
We like to say that once you've seen it, you can't unsee
it. Unsee it. Good one. I've seen some challenges, when the decision-making process goes through, you see a lot of technical folks get involved, and they are traditionally been trained, certified, and lived their life working on a platform and not exposed to the others. And for them, it's like, do I need to change? Will I get the edge? Or I will lose my edge trying to get my hands onto a new platform. How do you handle such scenarios?
So I think at a high level, there's a concern that someone's been trained on a specific platform and therefore they won't know how to use, or there'll be a significant retraining. It's simply not true. The certifications you refer to, a lot of that was based upon understanding how to use a CLI of a particular vendor. When we think of the skill set of a network engineer, it's much bigger than understanding the CLI. The analogy I make is I learned to drive a car a very long time ago, but when I show up at the airport to rent a car, I don't say, I need this make and model of car. It's the only one I know how to drive. I'm absolutely confident in driving whatever car they hand me the keys to. And that's where we think network engineers really are. I think there's also a realization, even these engineers that have the coveted certifications, which they've earned and should be proud of, is that the industry is moving away from CLI. And the real advantage they're going to bring to themselves and their employers going forward is to understand automation and things like Python and keeping themselves current. So I think that had been an issue a few years ago, more so than it is today. But now we're seeing CIOs that literally sit down with their team and say, look, if you think the value you're bringing to this organization is understanding this 20-year-old CLI, think again. We need you to do much more.
You have seen very closely how it is transformed in the last 10 years and so on, since you took on this role and worked very closely with the MIST evolution. And how do you see it going forward from here? What role you see Juniper continuing to play in this evolution?
Well, I think what's very clear is this whole concept of AI in networking. We're in the very early innings. We were really thrilled with some of the outcomes we saw from technologies like our dynamic packet capture, and we added about a year ago, we did an integration with Microsoft, the Teams application, and with Zoom. Because I don't know about you, but anytime I ever had a bad call, I never got a root cause analysis about why somebody was dropping or clipping or anything like that. And we realized there was something to be done there. And so we reached out to both companies and said, we've got an awful lot of telemetry about what's happening in the network during a call. If we could combine it with telemetry that you have from the application perspective, we might have a really comprehensive view. And what we were trying to do is improve our efficacy of, getting to the bottom of why did somebody have a bad Teams call. What we uncovered, though, was eye-opening for us. First, this is a really compelling capability for a lot of companies, for us to say, you had 60 people on a Teams call, 5 minutes in, these 3 people had a problem, here's what caused it. This was a big deal for us. But it turned out to be even bigger. So even when you think you've discovered something big, we're uncovering things that are even much bigger than that. What it turns out was happening is we were getting what AI people call labeled data from Microsoft and Zoom that was defining on a minute-by-minute basis what was a good experience or a bad experience. Now, we were combining that with an awful lot of data about what was happening in the network for your device at that exact same time. And together, it gave us this complete picture, and we used a technique called a Shapley value to then derive a root cause to say, yeah, KK was on the Zoom call, 10 minutes in he had a bad experience, and it was caused by an issue in the WAN. Boom, that's what people want to know. But what if you were in that Teams call and you were on a hotel network and you're the hotel operator and there was a bad experience, but you were using MIST equipment? The hotel isn't going to get data on your Teams call from your organization. Maybe we'd want to know why that happened. Or we could extrapolate. What if it was an application that we didn't have telemetry from? We've actually ended up building a model, what we call a large experience model, because over the course of millions and millions of calls, we've correlated what was happening in the network at the time when Microsoft or Zoom said there was a bad experience. We had labeled data, and we now have a model that we can say, hey, this collaboration application, this user's having a bad experience right now based upon just what we see from the network side alone. So when things like that happen, you realize just how much more is possible. So I think now I expect the pace of innovation to continue to accelerate. There were times when I thought, wow, we've knocked out a lot of problems. When a company like ServiceNow tells you you've eliminated 90% of all trouble tickets, when an organization, running the world's largest logistics network tells you you've reduced MTTR by 96%, you start to think, well, hey, we've probably checked a lot of boxes here. But there's so many more things that can be solved with this technology that it continues to be exciting. And that's where I think we'll lead. As long as we have this focus, very pragmatic focus, on what are the customer outcomes that matter, and how do we listen to our customers clearly and leverage their knowledge and feed it back into this system, then I think, the sky is the limit as to what we can do.
Does that take us into like a driverless car, like self-driven networks?
I'm glad you said that. So just a week ago at an event called the Mobility Field Day, we announced our first self-driving efforts on the network. And so for people in the audience who haven't been to a city with self-driving cars, and in the US it's San Francisco, I think it's Phoenix, there are a couple others, you have to experience this. I did personally. And, you have to experience it to build trust that this thing is going to work. The data is there from companies like Waymo that there are fewer accidents, that it is safer, but you have to have that experience. So we've now launched a new dashboard that has self-driving actions where we ask the customer for permission, and the customer has to give us permission until we build trust to allow us to fix things in the network. So I mentioned earlier, we can detect a missing VLAN. Do you want us to fix that? We give the customer the choice to say, yes, if you see it, fix it. And we want to do that until we build trust that you can count on us to first have the right data to be correct with no false positives, and then to take the right action with that. And so we are doing self-driving in the network, and we are building trust right now by asking for permission and giving the user control until they say, yeah, we trust you to do that.
Fabulous. Tom, can you talk about some of the joint wins?
Yeah, so without naming names, we're working with Microland on a global pharmaceutical companies network and also on a very large retailers network. And the outcomes that we've seen from both are very, very promising. One customer actually calculates the ratio of what you say you're going to do to what you actually did. And the QBR that Microland had with that customer was extremely positive. So I think the combination of the tools that we bring in our AI toolkit and the processes that Microland is able to implement using those tools has turned out very well for both organizations.
Thank you, Tom. We will wrap up. Fabulous. Tom,
I hope you get something good out of it.
Hopefully, we'll see.
Now we'll count on our editing friends to make us look like heroes.
Dear listeners, that brings us to the end of this special episode on self-driving networks and the AI advantage Juniper and Microland are delivering to enterprise IT. Tom and Bob, thank you very much for joining us today. It was a wonderful conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed. And to our listeners, thanks for tuning in. Until next time, stay curious and stay connected.